That's what it does and doesn't pick up.
Everything. It picks up all of the things.
Now I know.
My co-host, a dog.
You should have Finnegan on as a co-host.
He'd love it. He's very clever.
He's a smart boy.
He loves to read.
He's very vocal as well.
Weirdly, though, he's like super into dad lit.
That doesn't surprise me. You know, he's older.
Yeah, a little traditional.
Yeah.
Has a lot of opinions about the kids these days.
Oh, lots.
He's a big James Patterson stan.
Yeah. Does James Patterson also disapprove of dancing?
Probably.
Yeah.
One imagines. James Patterson also has hip dysplasia. Little known fact.
There's so much in common.
Books. Books. Books.
Hello and welcome to Didn't Read It, the podcast that likes their dystopias cozy.
Oh.
I am your host, Grace Todd, a writer, editor, and conscientious objector to Twitter book discourse. With me today is one of my beloved recurring co-hosts, Lee. Hi, Lee.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm doing just swell.
That's great. I'm glad
Yeah.
to hear it.
Thanks.
Welcome back. Do you want to say anything about yourself other than the fact that you exist?
No, I guess not. Just doing fine. Doing good. Trucking.
I'm existing.
Yeah.
Well, it's very nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you for having me.
So, quick question before we get rolling.
Mm-hmm.
What fiction are you loving lately on page or stage or screen?
Let's see. Well, I just started reading the book that you recommended, A Tip for the Hangman.
Hangman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I always say hangsman. I'm just throwing rogue S's into it.
And I just listened to the edit of the episode so Hangsman is in my head. So I don't know what it's called, but I am reading it and it is delightful.
Oh, yeah.
It's good. It's fun. And besides that, it's pretty much all murder she wrote all the time.
Another cozy dystopia, really, if you think about it.
Well, I don't know. Everything feels safe when Jessica Fletcher's around.
That is true.
She can do anything.
Well, dystopian in the sheer number of murders that happen.
A lot
in
of
this.
murders.
So
yeah. A lot of murders.
It's in Maine, right?
Her hometown is Cabot Cove, Maine. Like a disproportionate number, like the murder capital of the world there. But she travels so much because she's such a successful writer.
Right.
She's always traveling and doing book tours and this and that. And so I think the real secret of the series is that she's like a serial killer. Otherwise, why would so many murders pop up wherever she goes? Like, what's the common thread? What's the common denominator?
Jessica Fletcher is actually a character created by Stephen King. They're in overlapping universes.
I mean, that'd be cool. I don't know. It's my comfort show.
I love a good comfort show.
Yeah.
Well, today we are here to talk about not a comfort show.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, that's not really my thing.
No. But it is, much like many a cozy murder mystery, it is a dark comedy.
Ooh, okay.
And it's a little bit of a deep cut as sort of the literary canon goes.
Okay.
We are discussing Rose Macaulay's What Not.
Oh, yep. Haven't heard of it.
It bills itself as a prophetic comedy.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Sounds kind of dark.
It is a dystopian satire.
Okay. Okay. That sounds fun.
It was originally technically published in 1918.
Okay.
She wrote it during the First World War.
Yeah.
It is set after the First World War, and it was supposed to come out right around when the war was ending.
She knew that ahead of time.
Well, it had become increasingly clear what direction everything was headed in.
Okay.
And so she and I think a lot of other people started to think about what the post-war world would look like.
Yeah.
Because so much had changed and it had been so brutal.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly enough, it was supposed to come out in 1918. It went to print and then it was yanked, either, depending on who you ask, because it was censored by the government.
Okay.
Or because the publisher got worried about libel.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that delayed it by a whole year.
Okay.
And it finally came out in 1919 with about 2 pages worth of text excised from it.
Interesting.
Uh-huh.
A mystery unto itself.
Indeed. And the edition that I am working from was put out by Handheld Press in 2019.
That's 100 years later.
Exactly.
Okay.
after an academic named Sarah Lonsdale put forth the effort of finding an original manuscript, pre-censorship,
Okay.
and releasing it sort of intact.
That was going to be my question, was whether we know what happened to those 2 pages, but I didn't want to accidentally give spoilies.
No, we have them. We have them intact. We have them in this edition.
Spoilies included.
So props to Handheld Press, and thank you to Sarah Lonsdale for her excellent scholarship.
Whoop, whoop.
I will say I picked this copy up from a bookstore in London called Second Shelf Books, which only stocks books by women. But it is also pro-trans rights.
Why is it called Second Shelf? Why not First Shelf?
Anyway, they're very cool. I don't think they have a physical store anymore.
Okay.
But they are still on Twitter, and they are great, and I love them.
They're awesome.
All right. So, Lee,
What not? Yes.
I'm going to take you on a journey
Okay.
into the world of what not.
What not?
Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. We are in London, sometime after the Great War, although it doesn't specify how long after.
They didn't see that second one coming, I guess.
No, there's a lot of stuff in this book about like...
It'll never happen again.
Well, it's one of the things I find really interesting about it is that it is a book that is very preoccupied with how do we make sure it doesn't happen again?
Yeah.
Which I find much more interesting in that Macaulay, and I'm sure she wasn't alone in this, is operating from the perspective of, oh, this is just going to keep happening unless something is done.
That was like a lot of people understood that and knew that.
I doubt she was the only one.
Yeah.
You know, broadly. I feel like a lot of the supposed naivete of societies in the interwar period is overplayed because it makes a better story. They were all so convinced that it would never happen again, and then they got completely surprised by World War II.
Yeah.
It doesn't really feel like that maybe was the case.
We gotta give him some credit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, going back to Faustus, we seem bound and determined to pretend like everyone in the past was stupid. So, we're in London. The war is over, but it's clear that not too much time has passed.
Yeah.
Because the current generation of young men are pointed out to be still mentally and physically marked by the war.
Okay.
So the opening scene is on the underground.
The subway.
The subway.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
The London Underground.
Underground.
My very accurate accent.
Sounds good to me.
I'll just do the rest of the episode in my...
I would love it if you did that. I would love it.
I would upset so many people.
Is this a transatlantic audience?
I don't know.
Not to be pessimistic.
I just feel like someone would find a way to be offended.
Sure.
The London Underground. Pip, pip.
London Underground. That's offensive.
That's you leaned full Monty Python. I appreciate that.
That's all I know.
So the opening scene is on the underground, and the quote is that on the train there were tired young men, lame young men, pale and scarred young men, brown and fit young men, bored and blasé young men, jolly and amused young men, and nearly all, however brown or fit or pale or languid or jolly or bored, bore a peculiar and unmistakable impress stamped, faintly or deeply, on their faces, their eyes, their carriage, the set of their shoulders. This is a society that is still deeply scarred by the war that has taken place. And Macaulay really emphasizes how much this is an entire society of people who are still existentially reeling from this cataclysmic event.
The whole world just getting turned upside down.
And I think that's meant to kind of not excuse, but illuminate some of the things that happen. Because one of the things that I think is really cool is that the sort of sci-fi-ness, the dystopia of it all, creeps in really slowly.
Okay.
And you're well through the first scene before you start to be like, huh.
I love it like that. Yeah. Okay. That's cool.
Macaulay has that passage where she's talking about the young men, and then she turns the sort of narrative eye to the women in the carriage, and by extension, the sort of women in this society writ large. And she characterizes them with the following quote that is in bold.
An air of reckless anticipation, of being alert for any happening, however queer, that marked the majority of people in these days. For that, in many, seemed the prevailing note, A series of events so surprising as to kill surprise, of disasters so appalling as to numb horror, had come and gone, leaving behind them this reckless touch, and with it a kind of greed, a determination to snatch whatever might be from life before it tumbled again into chaos. And always there was that sense in the background of a possible great disaster, of dancing on the world's thin crust that had broken once and let one through and might break again. Its very thinness, its very fragility, added a desperate gaiety to the dance.
Speaking of things from historic time periods that don't feel familiar at all, even a little.
What?
The sense of being gripped by an air of reckless anticipation because you've just survived a cataclysm.
Yeah, no, I don't get that.
No.
I haven't felt that. All easy breezy beautiful over here.
Everything is great.
Yeah.
We're definitely not dancing on the world's thin crust and hoping it won't break beneath us again.
No. Well, as a little taste of real life, we were just talking this week, texting each other and some friends about what are you doing about the wildfire smoke and the bad air quality? And the kind of group answer was, I mean, something's gonna kill me. Might as well be this.
I don't know. Existing in it?
I'm thinking about it, but I'm also just going about my life.
Well, the air is poison.
Yeah.
And I have to get through the air to go to work.
I'm in the air now, unfortunately. Pretty dark and relatable.
So this is the scene we're setting. It's some cheerful shit. Everyone is having the best time.
Yeah. Feeling like a party on the underground.
Having a great day. Contemplating that an entire generation's worth of young men have been physically and emotionally traumatized, and an entire generation's worth of young women have been physically and emotionally traumatized, but in a different way.
Yeah, in new and exciting ways.
So that's nice. So Macaulay sets the scene. We're on the underground. We are introduced to two young women who become the two most consistent characters in the story.
Okay.
One of whom is definitively our protagonist.
Okay.
We start with Ivy Delmer. I know, isn't that cute?
Cute.
Ivy Delmer, who is the daughter of a small village vicar. Yeah.
The word vicar just always cracks me up. I don't know why.
It gets me too. I think it
doesn't
sounds
sound real.
It also, I feel like it's one of those words that sounds especially silly in American English.
Yeah.
There's something about the way that Americans pronounce their R's. You're just like, that's a...
How do they say it in England?
I am not going to try. It just sounds less dumb in an English accent, I feel like. I don't know.
Every time I hear it, I'm just like, oh, you think you're fancy? Oh, the vicar.
Yeah. So Ivy Delmer, the vicar's daughter. And then Kitty Grammont. You're going to have a lot of fun with all of the names and places.
It's like how when Harry Potter burst on the scene and Americans were like, oh my gosh, it sounds so cute and fantastical. And British people were like, this is just what we call things over here.
Oh, just you wait.
Okay. All right.
So Kitty Grammont, who is an adventurous, somewhat scandalous, distinctly independent young woman.
Oh.
And they are on the tube together because they are both headed to work at the Ministry of Brains.
Aha.
Which is...
sci-fi.
Where you're like...
Got it.
Ha!
Yeah.
I don't think we have one of those.
Didn't see that coming.
In 1918 when this novel is coming out.
I don't think we have one now. I could be wrong. I don't know.
They're getting off the...
tube.
They're getting off the tube. They're headed to the Ministry of Brains. And then Macaulay introduces her second little, this is different from the world, you know?
Yeah.
And I love it because in tried and true science fiction tradition, it's flying cars. It's always flying cars.
Ambitious. Cars were so new at that time.
Well, they're actually buses. They're Aerobuses.
Ooh.
They're flying Aerobuses.
Aww.
And we're going to take...
Would you settle for natural gas?
We're going to take a detour on the Aerobuses here for a second.
Okay. My
favorite thing about her sci-fi dystopia is that it's all extremely stupid. And she knows it. This is satirical.
Damn, right?
They've got Aerobuses now, right? Mm-hmm. But they are portrayed as being wildly dangerous.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. When did fucking Hindenburg? When did the blimp happen?
That's a good question. Let's Google it really quick. Oh, that didn't happen until 1937. She was...
Oh, okay. Wow.
She was way ahead of the time.
Prophetic.
The quick detour on the Aerobuses.
Yeah.
The book is littered with public service announcements by the Safety If Possible Council.
I love that. That's good.
I've got a couple here. You ready?
Yeah.
Is it safe? That is the question. No, that is the answer. The Safety If Possible Council.
Have you ever listened to Welcome to Night Vale?
Yes.
This feels like that.
It's Night Vale-y. Do it in your best public service announcement voice.
A will be killed because he is standing immediately beneath a descending Aerobus. B will be killed because he and others like him have shaken the nerve of the aviator.
It's just everything.
That's good.
Everything by the Safety of Possible Council is just like, you're going to die.
Yeah.
An Aerobus is going to squish you and you're going to die. And the narrator concludes that the warnings, quote, left one certain that, wherever one might achieve safety, it would not be in or anywhere at all near a street arrow.
Okay, well, you know.
The best part is that's really the only technological science fiction flair in the book. That's it. Like, the only real technological innovation is flying buses that are stupidly dangerous and crash all the time and land on top of people.
She's like, we're gonna have real cool future stuff, but it's gonna suck.
It feels so realistic.
Yeah.
It's the Teslas of it's the same thing. It's like, we have self-driving cars now and they're killing people
rapidly
all the time. Which that's exactly how it would happen, right? Like Elon Musk would be like, I invented a flying bus, and they would just squish people.
Yeah. Oh. What's he been distracted with lately? Space? No, Twitter.
Lawsuits.
Okay, good. He's distracted.
He's too busy.
That is what's happening with privatized space flight. You know, it's always like, oh, they launched a new rocket. Oh, the rocket fell down. Like,
it's only a matter of time before one of those rockets lands on a neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah. And what's her name predicted it? What's her name again?
Rose Macaulay.
Rose Macaulay predicted it.
She knew it was up.
Yeah.
Thank you for that quick detour on the Aerobus question. So, Kitty Grammont, our protagonist.
The sassy one is the protagonist. Okay.
Yes, she's our protagonist. Ivy Delmer is kind of her foil.
Yeah.
Ivy Delmer's like a sweetie. And one of the things that the novel does with Ivy that I really like is that she doesn't seem to be given a ton of credit by people around her, but she's very thoughtful. The novel veers into her and Kitty's perspectives at different points.
Cool.
And Ivy is a little younger, a little more naive, a little more easily carried away by like propaganda.
Okay.
But she's a very thoughtful young woman.
Yeah.
I think she provides a really useful foil to Kitty, who is more of what you kind of think of as the flapper. She just doesn't really... She's disengaged, sort of emotionally. She's pretty cynical. She works for the Ministry of Brains, but she doesn't really believe... Like, she's making propaganda, but she doesn't really believe the propaganda that she's making.
Clocking in, clocking out.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's very just, we just survived a world war. Life is a game. I'm just gonna like coast through and have fun and enjoy myself.
Relatable.
I'm gonna do things as long as they're interesting.
Yeah.
She's described as, quote, something of the elegant rake, something of the adventuress, something of the scholar. She had seen some life in a past which, if checkered, had not lacked its gaiety, meant to see much more in a future which she did not foresee clearly, but which she intended should be worthy of her.
Kitty.
I know.
I like Kitty.
I like Kitty a lot.
She sounds fun.
With Kitty and Ivy's guidance, we are taken into the Ministry of Brains.
Dun, dun, dun.
The Ministry of Brains is a government department that was founded sometime after World War One. Well, they're not calling World War One.
Oh. Oh no. The only war.
You're going to have to help me stay on top.
The last war.
You're going to have to help me stay on top of that because it's the Great War.
Yeah.
The single.
Yep.
The only one.
Yeah. Bummer.
Founded after the Great War to, in their view, increase the overall intelligence of the country so as to avoid a catastrophe like that ever happening again.
Interesting.
That's the idea.
Okay.
In Macaulay's narration is that the Great War essentially could only have been caused
By dum-dums.
by a mass overflowing, a global scale overflowing of stupidity on all fronts. And that the only way to prevent it, in the eyes of Britain, is to make everyone smarter than that.
Flawless plan.
And to make them smart enough that either they can prevent another great war, or that at least they as a country will be clever enough to sidestep being involved in the next one.
Yeah. Nerds don't get in fights. Everyone knows that. It's time-tested truth.
Gotta outwit them.
Mm-hmm.
So the Ministry of Brains, with this in mind, has embarked on a series of projects, but the story is primarily preoccupied with two.
Okay.
The Mind Training Acts and the Mental Progress Act.
Sounding eugenicsy, but okay. Go on.
The Mind Training Acts are sort of a send-up of well-intentioned but largely pointless bureaucratic solutions.
Uh-huh.
The idea is that they are encouraging the citizens of Britain to attend mind training courses, which are supposed to improve their intellect, although we're never really told how.
This feels so like useless corporate training bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get more into it later because it's a little more nuanced than it seems, but it is definitely presented that way. Like
Yeah.
It is silly.
Yeah.
And what they are currently trying to do is to get everyone to take the mind training courses voluntarily.
Uh-huh.
But they're having some trouble getting people to cooperate.
That's surprising.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep. The more concerning of the two, though, is the Mental Progress Act.
Yeah. Tell me why. It's concerning. I can't guess.
So the government of Britannia, has registered and rated every adult on a scale from A to C3.
Okie dokie.
And a system has been put in place where infants are taxed or bonused based on their parents' relative rankings.
Okay.
There's a whole system that is meant to encourage people to, like, spread the relative brain wealth.
Uh-huh.
If an A and an A get together, that's actually
bad.
That's less than ideal.
Yeah.
You want that A to go have a baby with, like, a C.
To go slum it.
So that you bring
So
up
the kid is an average.
the overall brains of the race.
Yeah. Chill. Very chill. Very cool. Very chill.
The quote is, "To ally yourself with another A or B1 was regarded as wasteful, there not being nearly enough of these to go around, and your babies would receive much smaller bonuses. If you were classed C1, C2, or C3, your babies would receive no encouragement, unless you had diluted their folly with an A partner. If you chose to unite with another C, they were heavily fined. And if you were below C3, uncertificated, they were fined still more heavily. And for the third and subsequent infants born under such conditions, you would be imprisoned. Only the ministry had not been working long enough for anyone to have yet met with this fate."
Ah. Is sterilization a thing in this world?
No.
Okay.
And that's one of the interesting
It's a
things.
little bright spot.
Well, one of the things that gets me about this is it feels so realistic, especially
It does.
compared to, like, the other science fiction dystopias that are to follow.
Yeah.
Brave New World in 1984. This is such a humdrum.
That's how, because that's how it is, you know?
Yeah.
It's the banality of, I mean, the phrase isn't the phrase the banality of evil?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't even feel evil. Like,
Yeah.
it is. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. And the book is about eugenics at its heart.
Yeah.
But she does it in this way that is it's such a light touch. And it feels so
Possible.
possible and so dumb. Like,
Yeah.
everything that is happening, you're like, this is so dumb. It's like
Yeah.
a Faulty Towers sketch.
Yeah.
So those are the two big things at the moment.
The two very chill,
Super laid back.
very understandable.
Yeah.
Very good.
This is how we're going to prevent
Government.
another great war, is by heavily taxing babies the government deems stupid.
Yeah.
This is where I would like to pause and point out that this is also essentially the plot of the movie Idiocracy.
Oh, 100%. I was thinking that that's literally in like the first 5 minutes of that movie.
Yeah, so I would just like to point out that something that Rose Macaulay was making fun of in 1918 was not sufficiently made fun of to the point where it was used unironically in a film.
Yeah.
In what year?
I don't know. Early 2000s.
Yeah. So the Ministry of Brains, I love the names,
I'm going to get used to it.
is responsible for enforcing these laws as well as handling all of the necessary exemptions. And there are some great
Exemptions?
letters in this that are, like, very darkly funny.
Yeah.
Kitty's getting all these letters that are like, my baby drowned and I'm still being taxed on it. And Kitty's
My stupid baby drowned.
Actually, let me see if I can find The letters are so bad. It was a melancholy tale from an aggrieved citizen concerning his infant, who was liable to a heavy tax, and who had been drowned by his aunt while being washed before he was 2 hours old, and the authorities still demanded payment of the tax. Kitty, who found the helplessness of MB4 annoying, which is the other office that has turfed her this letter to deal with, wrote a curt minute, "Neither information nor action seems to us necessary." Then had to erase it because it looked rude, and wrote instead, more mildly, "Seen, thank you. This man appears to be covered by MBI 187, in which case his taxation is surely quite in order, and no action is possible. We see no reason why we should deal with the case rather than you."
That is familiar.
Well,
she's like, "Oh no, we don't know. No. We don't do that here. That's your job."
And also, the book is littered with all these little cases of very real human tragedies.
Yeah.
That are just being met with, like a bureaucratic wall.
Just reduced to like a bureaucratic category.
Yeah. In a dramatically heartless fashion. Like,
yeah.
The government just does not care.
Yeah.
So the ministry's been trying to get everyone to do these mind training courses voluntarily, but it's not working very well. And so the next thing they're going to do is make them compulsory.
Yes. You gotta.
And this is the project on which Kitty is embarking as we enter into the Ministry of Brains for the first time.
Okay.
We also meet her coworker and friend, Vernon Prideaux.
Okay.
Prideaux.
Prideaux.
Yeah.
Sure.
Vernon is like a good pal of Kitty's, and I am 99.9% sure he's supposed to be gay.
Ooh. He does have a French last name.
Everything about the way that he is described and the way he carries himself, I am certain that he and Kitty are supposed to be such good friends because he is queer.
Yeah. And
also, tellingly, Ivy has a little bit of a crush on him. It just shows you who Ivy is.
Yeah. Okay. Paint a picture.
Yeah.
Got it. Queer is coded.
We meet Prideaux in the middle of an ongoing Cold War with his very, very stupid secretary.
Okay.
Who is deeply incompetent, and also tellingly, one of the things that she keeps doing is when she's sending official correspondence back to members of the public, she's tacking on editorializations like, "It's the stupidity of people like you who caused the Great War." But she's also breathtakingly incompetent.
I kind of love her.
Yeah, she's great.
Good for her. You know, why know things if you can not know things?
And lash out at people for it.
Yeah, do so angrily.
From the position of working in the Ministry of Brains.
Yeah.
We're painting a picture here.
Yes, I'm loving the picture. This is very silly and fun. Well, and tragic. Hold on. Dark. It's darkly funny.
The other big kind of important thing that we establish, because Kitty is working in the propaganda arm of the Ministry of Brains, is the state of post-war censorship.
Okay.
So censorship was a big thing and a big deal in the Great War.
Very big, very real.
And one of the things that Macaulay is establishing, thinking about when she wrote it and the perspective she's taking, is that it has clearly not gotten any better now that the war is over, and in fact has gotten much worse.
I mean, you have to rationalize why the war happened and why you went through all that, you know?
Right. There won't be too many more of these, but I find them useful to kind of establish the world. I've got 2 more excerpts that I would like you to read.
Okay.
That are about the overall censorship of texts, pamphlets, books, etc.
Gotcha. Pamphlets may, and often do, deal with dangerous or indecent topics, such as the future. There were dangerous and explosive words like peace, war, and freedom, which the censor dealt with drastically. The danger of the word peace dated from the days when peace had not yet arrived, and discussion of it was improper, like the discussion of an unborn infant. By the time peace did arrive, its relegation to the region of things we do not mention had become a habit, not lightly to be laid aside, so that a Ministry of Brains pamphlet titled The Peace of Fools had been strangled before birth. If treatises concerning peace were suspect from force of habit, works on war were discouraged also, on the sound British principle that the stress of a great peace is not the time to talk of war. We must first deal with peace, and then think about war. But one thing at once, and do not let us cry war, war, when there is no war. But there may be one day, argued the pamphleteers, and might it not be well to prepare our minds for it? To which the answer very properly was no. Britons do not look ahead. They come through instead. I like all of her capitalizing of things for emphasis.
Yeah, it's...
Little did she know that 100 years later, that'd be a big use of humor on social media.
Rose Macaulay would have cleaned up on Twitter.
Yeah.
She would have been great.
The queen of Tumblr.
Oh my God, she would have been amazing on Tumblr.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who is listening out there, someone needs to make a Tumblr account impersonating Rose Macaulay. Please.
Yeah.
We need you.
Your country needs you. Can I do a little aside?
Sure.
Is every time you say propaganda, I just think of that, like... Do you know what I'm going to say?
I think so.
That tweet that went viral within the past couple months that was like, propaganda this, propaganda that. Let me take a propaganda at them titties. Just every time you say propaganda, I'm like, titties. But I will focus.
Well,
yeah.
Kitty is working on all of this propaganda.
Yes, it is very serious, and it is not a trifling matter.
But another way that I feel like her character is so... It's a thing I'm trying to figure out how to avoid saying over and over again in a lot of these books is I keep wanting to be like, she just feels so contemporary.
I think you can say that. Like, you can emphasize that because, that was 100 years ago. Things have changed so much since then. And, like, things have changed, but people haven't.
Well, and that's the thing is it feels a little weird to be like, it feels so contemporary when it probably always has.
Yeah.
Depending on where we are culturally. But
I think it's a good thing to emphasize because it just reminds us of the importance of history and how much we can still learn from it and why we keep repeating the same fucking mistakes over and over again. It's because we think we're so much smarter.
That's true. Thank you for packaging that little bon mot on the point of this podcast.
I don't know what that means. Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you.
I speak no French.
All of which is to say, one of my favorite things about Kitty is that she's portrayed as being very good at her job. She is a talented propagandist and also does not care.
Yeah.
She does not believe in any of the underpinning ideology.
Yeah.
She takes kind of a detached pride in being competent, but she doesn't actually care about her job.
Also find that very relatable. Yeah. Love that for her.
And she is constantly reminding other people that the ministry's days are probably numbered and that the British public is only going to put up with this for so long. And
she's reminding like her coworkers of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Go Kitty.
And also constantly thinking it to herself.
Yeah.
And I'm highlighting that because I feel like, especially in a novel like this, the more common narrative structure is to have either a character who starts out really, really invested in the ideology, who then slowly becomes disillusioned, or to have a character, especially in like American sci-fi, to have a character who from the get is the one rugged idealist in a society full of sheeple.
Yeah.
And instead, this to me, again, just feels so much more real because it's a building full of people who are, many of whom are clever enough to know better.
You're like, well, I need a job.
Yeah, it's a job.
Yeah.
What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Not?
They said I can't do that, so I guess I shall.
Pretty much. So that's kind of the scene setting. Kitty and Ivy, they work at the Ministry of Brains. Their friend Vernon also works at the Ministry of Brains. And the country is in the midst of a shift.
Okay.
All of these acts have been instituted, but they're pretty new and they're still kind of trying to figure out what it's all going to look like. No one has yet been imprisoned as a result of these laws because they haven't been in effect for that long.
Yeah. It's not like a quick and brutal crackdown or anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is bureaucracy muddling through.
Dipping a toe in the water.
And so with all of that being established, we are about to meet the Minister of Brains.
Oh, Mr. Brain himself.
Mr. Brain himself.
Mr. Minister Brain.
Nicholas Chester.
I thought he'd have a more British name. That's pretty British, I guess.
It's pretty British.
You gotta put like a bottom at Nicholas Chesterbottom.
Chester is very much portrayed as being A, incredibly charismatic, B, hot in a weird way, and C, so charismatic that the success or failure of the Ministry of Brains is really riding on his ability to push these things through.
Always a good sign.
And he's an idealist. He
believes it.
Yes, he believes it very intensely. He's a super intense guy, but also hot in a weird way. I have another quick interactive portion for you.
Okay.
Because he's described as looking like a cross between Premier Kerensky, a member of the Geddes family, and Nelson Keys. And these are the kind of topical references that don't make sense 100 years later.
I was like, maybe I'll know. Nope, don't know anymore.
So I've pulled photos of 3 of those people.
Oh, this is great. I'm excited.
And I want you to attempt
to describe them?
Attempt to describe maybe what a cross of the 3 of them would look like.
White. 2 of them look kind of smug. Let's see. Okay. Generic white guys. Let's see. Kerensky and Keys kind of have like moody eyes. I could see that. Geddes looks like a football player. I don't know. I could see a weird hotness. If I had to describe each 3 as a type of hot, which I don't necessarily agree with, but just, I want to stick with the hot train.
Yeah.
So Kerensky is like kind of moody hot. Mm-hmm. Geddes is like football player, like jock hot. And Keys looks to be like kind of aristocratic, fancy hot.
It's a real hybrid.
Nicholas contains multitudes, and by that I mean 3 people.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. It's always funny to pause when you're reading old-time liture, and it's like, yeah, he was so hot. He looked like a cross of these 3 people, and you're like, well, time to go Google him.
And you look him up, and you're like, okay, sure.
Right. He's consistently described as sallow, exhausted looking, and like embittered. He's weird hot.
Yeah.
100%.
I get it. Vampire hot.
Kitty is starting to notice him from a distance.
Oh.
She's going to be introduced to him soon.
She's going to meet the big boss man.
She's going to meet the big
hot,
man.
Weird boss man.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's also some intimations of some secrets around the boss man.
And you don't say.
Yeah, I know. And we're given this teaser. And then we are off to Little Chantry's.
What is that?
It is a village.
Oh, okay. Do we like totally change characters or?
No, Kitty and Ivy are both headed to Little Chantry's again on the same train. Because that is where Ivy's father is the vicar, and where Kitty spends weekends with her brother Anthony.
Oh, nice.
Anthony is a sweetie, and he lives in sin with his
Tony,
with his not quite wife Pansy Ponsonby.
Get it, Tony?
And their baby.
Sorry, can you say her name again?
Pansy Ponsonby.
That's what I was looking for.
Anthony Gramont, Pansy Ponsonby. And their not yet named baby, who they refer to as the Cheaper.
Why would you call your baby? Oh, like bird cheap, like cheap.
I guess so.
How's it spelled?
Cheeper.
Okay.
Yeah, the Cheaper.
Like a little baby bird.
Or just Cheeps.
That's cute.
Yeah, he's like a 4-month-old.
How smart is he?
He's just cute and happy.
Is he stupid?
He's happy.
They gotta pay a tax on him. He sounds too happy. It's suspicious. He's probably a little dum-dum.
We show up in Little Chantry's, and it's very much Macaulay taking the opportunity to intercut rural life with London.
Okay.
And if London is a little sci-fi, rural England, and especially Little Chantry's, is unchanged.
Okay.
It
Interesting.
is exactly the way that it probably always has been.
Yeah.
There are all of these little asides. Like the vicar's wife tried some of these newfangled things and just hated them. And is like, no one has time for this.
Yeah.
This is stupid and I hate it.
Yeah.
They keep making references to some kind of new electric weeding tool. And we tried it and then the baby electrocuted himself. We just gave up. And so in Little Chantry's, Kitty's family and End House are kind of the local scandalous family.
Yeah.
Because they are living in sin and the baby hasn't been baptized or registered and doesn't have a name yet. They are total bohemians.
Yeah. Disgusting.
Pansy is a revue dancer.
Ooh, cha-cha-cha.
Just shy of burlesque. I mean, basically is burlesque.
They have that in a little rural English town?
Well, I think she commutes to London for shows.
Okay.
And she's pretty famous.
Oh, good for her.
And it specifically notes that she still dances in reviews pretty frequently and that Anthony wouldn't want her to hide her talents, away at home.
Love that. Don't hide your talents, don't hide your tatas.
Keep them out.
Get the money.
And Ivy observes of the people who stay at End House, they all had 2 looks in common. They looked as if they wouldn't get on very well with her father and mother. And they looked as if they didn't read the Bible.
That's funny to think about because that's got me thinking, like, what does someone who looks like they read the Bible look like? You know what? Yeah, I do kind of have an image of that. Okay. Okay. I got it. Accurate.
Yeah, you're like, I can pin that down.
Yeah.
And it is noted that Anthony did serve in the war and had a rough time in it, was in some very bad parts of France. There's a lovely line about him and all the stuff that he dealt with.
Poor Anthony.
And how when he came back, He was tired enough, mentally and physically, by his life of the last few years, its discomforts, its homelessness, its bondage, its painful unnaturalness, to sink with relief into Pansy's exotic cushions and all they stood for.
Aw.
Yeah, this is a really blessed and wonderful, cozy little household full of people who love each other.
Yeah, that's nice.
I know. Pansy's like a total bohemian. The parlor's kitted out in big floor cushions instead of furniture. And there's pictures all over the house of her doing her famous snake dances.
The dance of the seven veils.
Yeah. And everyone is deeply scandalized about the fact that they're living in sin. But also, and again, I think this is an interesting note from Macaulay, the vicar is scandalized enough that he doesn't want his children going to End House. Mm-hmm. But he and his wife go to End House not infrequently.
Okay.
Because they're just nice people.
End House is the name of the...
Sorry, it's the weird thing where all the British houses have names.
Oh, okay. So they just go over there to visit, have dinner or something?
They pop by for tea and stuff.
Okay. Interesting.
It's lovely.
And like in a sincere way, not in like a passive-aggressive way.
In a sincere way, yes.
Okay.
The vicar and his wife are very much portrayed as true Christians. Who have consciences and principles and adhere to them, but in a good way.
Yeah. Jesus loved the hoes.
You know? He did. And so this is the community that we're building here.
Okay.
In Little Chantries.
Yeah.
There is another brother, Cyril, who we're not going to spend a ton of time with, but I think he's important only because as a side character, he is described as being both extremely intelligent. So this is Anthony and Kitty's other brother.
Okay.
Who is visiting.
Yeah.
We don't really see him again. But he is very smart and an absolute piece of shit.
My kind of people.
He sucks.
Just kidding. Wait, my people are kind of dum-dums.
He's characterized as being an adult convert to Catholicism.
Why?
An anti-Semite.
Oh.
An anti-Muslim. He's bad. And the defining quote of Cyril is, he decides at some point during the war that he's going to convert to Christianity and, quote, as wartime is no time for Christians, as they have to do so much either explaining or protesting or both, he very sensibly waited to convert until the war was over.
Yeah.
That's who he is.
Cyril's a dick.
Yeah, Cyril's a dick.
Yeah.
He also shows up and the very first thing he does is get into a big fight with Pansy because apropos of nothing, he tells her that her baby is going to hell because it hasn't been baptized.
Bro.
And she...
Has he been baptized?
I'm assuming so. If he's an adult convert to Catholicism.
Yeah, but did he like commit, you know?
I don't know.
All right.
So he sucks.
F off, Cyril.
Macaulay does this really deft thing where anytime you start to think that one character stands for their entire sort of cohort of people, whether it's people who are smart, people who are not, people who are religious, people who are not, there's always another character somewhere.
To complicate it?
Yeah,
I like that.
So Cyril's an asshole. But
yeah.
Pansy Ponsonby is great, and I love her.
Pansy Ponsonby.
Pansy Ponsonby. So they've arrived in Little Chantries for Brains Sunday.
What is Brains Sunday, Grace?
It is like a government holiday. It's their last-ditch attempt to inspire the populace to get on board with the mind training courses.
Yeah. Okay.
The vicar gives his Brains Sunday sermon, which has been helpfully provided by the government.
Yeah.
More or less. But because he's a genuinely good person, he goes a little rogue and starts talking about how the baby taxes are bad, actually.
Wow.
An invasion into people's lives that shouldn't really happen.
Wow.
And he wanders into dangerous territory, but then kind of veers back on track at the end by being like, but the mind training courses are good.
Yeah.
It's good to be smart.
Homework on a Sunday.
And the only real thing that happens, which I think is kind of cute, is that the vicar's boldness so impresses Pansy that she decides that maybe she'll have the baby baptized after all. That's the kind of person she is. They're walking out of the church and she's just like, well, that was very bold of him saying that with all these government employees here.
She's like, that's fun. Sure, let's do it.
Yeah, that is exactly who she is.
Yeah.
Little Chantries is just covered in Ministry of Brains posters and propaganda, which are great.
So like a bunch of government people live there too and are like listening to a sermon?
It's Kitty and Vernon and Ivy, who are all Ministry of Brains employees.
Yeah.
They're all there watching. But that's our quick little detour into Little Chantries, just to kind of give you an idea of like what rural England is doing.
Yeah, beyond just the city.
And then we are back in London.
Back in London again.
Where Brains Sunday, followed by Brains Week.
Come on.
Didn't have quite the impact the government was hoping.
Really?
And Kitty and Vernon get into a debate on the matter where Kitty, again, is just kind of, people are not going to put up with this.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't feasible. People are going to get upset. People are
Yeah.
going to start pushing back. At the same time, Kitty finally meets Nicholas Chester, the Minister of Brains.
The weird hot guy.
The weird hot guy.
Secrets.
Well, she also finds out what the secret is.
Oh.
Nicholas Chester
He's a robot.
is uncertificated for marriage.
What does that mean?
He's an A. He's classified an A, but A parentheses uncertificated because he has 2 siblings with severe learning disabilities.
Okay. Was wondering if we were going to get into all this ableist Yeah.
He's not allowed to get married or have kids. Just full stop.
Pretty fucking realistic to the time. Yeah.
Even though he is the Minister of Brains. This is his...
He's Mr. Brain himself.
He's Mr. Brain himself. Also, importantly, these were his ideas.
I was kind of thinking that. I was like, are these laws that he was just chosen to enforce, or were they his ideas to begin with? And it's the latter?
It's not quite portrayed as him doing them completely alone in isolation, but he's the idealist who helped push these through. Like,
he's Mr. Brain.
He's Mr. Brain.
Yeah.
And he's not allowed to get married.
I mean, does he even want to get married?
Well.
Oh. Spoilies. Do they code that queer too?
So, Brains Week has failed.
Who could have predicted that?
Chester is uncertificated for marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Kitty, we find out, is engaged to some guy who's a revolutionary loving fail son. They haven't seen each other in years and years and years. He's just like drifting around the globe helping with revolutions that are consistently failing all over the world. He was like in Russia, he was in Greece, and she keeps writing him letters to break off their engagement. But every time the letter gets to where he was, he's gone again. And so she's been trying to break this engagement off for several years. She refers to the letter as the boomerang because she just keeps sending it and it keeps coming back.
Oh my God. What's his name?
Neil Desmond, Esquire.
Neil Desmond, Esquire.
Yeah.
Does Esquire mean he's born of a fancy family?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Basically, it says every so often, like on bank holidays or when she has free time, she tidies the drawers of her table and writes a letter to break off her engagement.
She's like, oh yeah, I was meaning to do that. Let's just cross it off the to-do list.
That's where Kitty's at.
Yeah.
And we now know that Chester is uncertificated for marriage.
Deep, dark secret.
And there's definitely something brewing with her and the minister, but we don't know what yet.
Weird, hot flirtation.
Meanwhile, Kitty is sent off on an explanation campaign.
Okay.
Because they're getting ready to make the mind training acts compulsory.
Okay.
And so they're going around to all the different little villages.
Yeah.
To stand on a metal tub and be like, this is why it's good.
Yeah.
This is why we should do it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's sent out there because, again, she's a pretty talented propagandist.
Yeah.
She's sent with a lady doctor named Dr. Cross.
Okay.
And a very conservative, radical freelance clergyman.
Okay.
He's presented as kind of a clergyman for hire. That the government just kind of like hires every once in a while to go do propaganda.
Yeah.
Definitely has fashy undertones. He goes on a rant that...
Probably very chill.
You'll recognize some of these tones.
Oh, no.
What is freedom? I beg that no one will tell me it is mastery of ourselves. I have heard that before. It is no such thing. Mastery of ourselves is a fine thing. Freedom is, or would be, if anyone had had such a thing, an absurdity, a monstrosity. It would mean that there would be nothing, either external or internal, to prevent us doing precisely what we like. No laws of nature, of morality, of the state, of the church, of society. And because, again, this is a dark comedy, he gets to that part, and Kitty leans over to the other person on the propaganda campaign and is like, you have to stop him right now. It's very embarrassing.
Cut the mic.
The doctor that they're on the tour with pulls up 2 babies to be like, this is an example of a certified baby, and this is an example of an uncertified baby. And do you see how this baby is bouncy and bright-eyed and clearly like a model of intellect? And do you see how this baby is languid? And she says horrible things.
Yeah.
And then the mothers both come running out, and she had them backwards.
Oh, my God.
So it's going really well.
Dude, that's funny. It reminds me of this like sketch on that comedy Netflix show called I Think You Should Leave. And they have a sketch called Baby of the Year. and it is comedic gold, and it's the very over-the-top baby pageant.
Oh my God.
And it is basically that exact scene, and they're just like describing and making fun of the babies.
Everything is going great, and eugenics very clearly works super well.
That is, I mean, I'm getting caught up on the fact that this is so real. This was happening. People were institutionalized and sterilized and criminalized and everything. There were like legal medical categories of this is what a moron is, this is what an idiot is, this is what a, blah, blah, blah. And they're just describing different, basically, intellectual and developmental disabilities that like literally happened.
Yeah.
And it's happening in this story to the babies.
It's interesting, too, because not that England didn't have their own really fucked up shit, and we'll talk about this later, but England never passed sterilization laws to the scale that the United States did.
Yeah.
So this is all very embarrassing and going very poorly. But in the middle of all of it, Kitty and Chester are invited to the same weekend at a country house.
Oh, I don't know. Kitty had it like that.
It's an old school friend.
Okay.
Whose husband is an old friend of Chester's.
Oh.
And they wind up at the same house, and they start getting into...
Floyding.
They're taking walks together. They find each other very charming.
Walks.
I know.
That's...
And then they go on a couple of dates. They go to see a really absurd-sounding propaganda film.
I'm ready.
The Secret of Success depicted lurid episodes in the careers of two young men. The contrast was not, in other drama, between virtue and vice, but between intelligence and the reverse. Everywhere intelligence triumphed, and the reverse was shamed and defeated. Intelligence found the hidden treasure, covered itself with glory, emerged triumphant from yawning chasms, flaming buildings, and the most suspicious situations, rose from obscure beginnings to titles, honors and position, and finally won the love of a pure and wealthy girl, who jilted the brainless youth of her own social rank to whom she had previously engaged herself, but who had, in every encounter of wits with his intelligent rival, proved himself of no account, and who was finally revealed in a convict's cell, landed there by his conspicuous lack of his rival's skill in disengaging himself from compromising situations. Intelligence, with his bride on his arm, visited him in his cell, gazed on him with a pitying shake of the head, and observed, "But for the government mind training course, I might be in your shoes today."
That's interesting, though, because this like new ranking cuts across class lines, which are so deeply embedded in British culture. It's like we no longer care if you're upper class or whatever. Like if you're stupid.
Well, and it's explicitly pointed out that the gentry are not fans of this whole
I'm sure.
situation.
Yeah.
In part because they don't like having their tenants educated.
Yeah.
Like one of the interesting things, and I want to talk about this more later, but one of the really interesting things about this is the two policies are not the same. There's the bad eugenicsy thing. And then the mind training courses, I think, are really interesting because what they amount to is universal adult education.
Yeah.
And it's pointed out, like, it is not a cure-all, it's not a magic pill, but it does help some people.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about those two different approaches because we were talking about the mind training as completely ineffective, but the idea behind it is pretty egalitarian.
It's portrayed as middlingly effective in the way that all education is, which is like some people take to it, some people don't.
Yeah.
For some people, it's genuinely life-changing. Like there's a scene where there's an old woman complaining that a bunch of the young women have gone to the mind training courses and are now spending all of their time reading books instead of doing housework, which is fine.
Yeah.
By me.
Yeah. By this one.
And also seems pretty fine by Macaulay.
But what kind of intelligence are we talking about here? Are we talking about book smarts or street smarts?
That we don't dive enough into. There's no real. We have no further detail on the mind training courses.
Okay.
We have some other world building details that pop up later, but we don't get a ton of information.
Okay.
But Kitty and Chester.
Back to Kitty and Chester.
They're going on dates. They're going to see terrible propaganda movies. They talk about how terrible that propaganda movie is. They talk about the fact that the government has completely ruined cinema by loading it down with propaganda.
But it's their propaganda.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
That's,
cool.
I mean,
They bond over their cynicism.
who among us has not written a social media post for a company we work for and hate and posted it and been like, this is awful,
Yeah.
as we're doing it?
Yeah. That's legit. That's true.
Kitty begins to think that Chester might have a crush on her.
Oh.
But she keeps telling her that that can't possibly be because he's the minister of brains and he's uncertificated for marriage. So he couldn't possibly pursue her.
No romantic feelings whatsoever.
He's not allowed.
He can't even date?
This all feels very modern, but it is important to remember that this is like 1918.
Yeah.
You date to get married, right? That is still kind of the level of polite society we're working in. Pansy might be living in sin,
Yeah.
but that's scandalous.
Is this still the time period where condoms were like only for sailors or something?
Chester and Kitty definitively are boning. You
didn't say that.
Well, we haven't gotten there
oh,
yet.
well, sorry.
They embark on like an affair.
Okay.
But it's still considered, for them to be together at all is considered the height of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Because A of all, they could accidentally have a baby.
Uh-huh.
And B of all, it's that awkward in between where like, are consenting adults having sex behind closed doors without being married? Yeah, definitely. But like, they're very much not supposed to be.
Yeah, because of Homeland Security.
What?
If they have stupid babies, there'll be another war, Grace.
Sure, yes, but I'm mostly talking about marriage here. It's just, this is still a deeply old-fashioned society in some ways. You can't publicly be like, yeah, I'm definitely having premarital sex.
It's not smiled upon.
But they haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
Kitty's like, he might have a crush on me, but maybe he doesn't have a crush on me. And I think I have a crush on him. And it's very cute.
Yeah.
They're caught briefly in what feels like a little bit of a standoff. And then the sort of deus ex machina that shakes them out of their...
Sexual complacency.
There we go. That shakes them out of their sexual complacency is that they're both in an Aerobus that crashes.
Oh, my God. I mean... Nothing to kick off a romantic affair like a traumatic event.
It's
a near-death experience.
The bus starts to go down and, quote, in that dizzy moment, the minister swayed toward Kitty and said, relax the body and don't protrude the tongue. And then the crash came.
Oh. I actually relate to that because I used to jog. I used to be like a jogger, like a run. I wouldn't say I was a runner. I wasn't very fast, but I used to go on runs a lot, and I found myself. I actually remember describing this to you once, and you being like, oh, "Okay." I found myself. I would run with my tongue slightly out, and I was always worried that I would trip and bite my fucking tongue off. And whenever I told anyone, they'd be like, "Just keep your fucking tongue in your mouth when you run."
Well, if it makes you feel any better, because he is in the act of telling Kitty not to stick her tongue out, he bites his own tongue in the crash. But also he briefly thinks that she is dead.
Oh.
And in the aftermath, when
Yeah.
she regains consciousness, he gets her into a taxi to take her home.
Yeah.
Help her get the rest of the way home, since they're obviously not going to continue on the Aerobus that just fell out of the sky with them in it. And he can't help himself, and he just blurts out his affection. And they are
bloodily because he bit his tongue.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're really cool. Oh, mind the blood.
So they're young. They're horny.
He's young. He's not old, Mr. Brain?
No.
Okay.
No.
He's hot young.
Yeah, he's a hot young idealist.
Yeah. I didn't know if he was like daddy brains.
He's a little daddy, but I also get the impression that a lot of Kitty's affection for him is despite the idealism.
Yeah.
Not because of it.
Oh, for sure.
I feel like a lot of the time they spend together, he's talking about his burning principles for the good of the country. And she's like,
yeah.
Like, oh, you're cute when you're being stupid. So they embark on a torrid affair.
Okay, now it starts.
It's very between the lines, but they are totally fine.
If you know the literature of the time, you know what Rose is trying to say.
They are boning.
Yeah. Pound Town.
Yes, they have gone to Pound Town. Mm-hmm. And 6 months...
They did not take the Aerobus there.
They did not take the...
No.
Well, the Aerobus...
The Aerobus took them to Pound Town in a way.
By crashing.
Yeah. Okay.
The Aerobus crash landed them in Pound Town.
Straight in Pound Town. Straight into the bone zone.
Yeah. And this goes on for about 6 months.
Okay.
There's some quick little scene setting about the way that these different mind training policies are going. The mind training acts have become compulsory. The public is getting a little fussy about it, but it seems to be
overall not too big a deal.
At least on the mind training courses.
Okay.
The baby taxing side of things
It's going great.
is now leading to mass abandonment of infants.
You don't say.
I know.
Huh.
Shocking.
Well, that doesn't follow.
People are abandoning babies all over the place, and people are being taxed into literal poverty because of their
dumbness.
Because of their uncertificated babies.
I'm laughing about this, but if I think about it too hard, it makes me really sad.
That's how dark satire goes.
I know. But I only watch Murder, She Wrote and Golden Girls, so I'm not ready to feel things.
Well, so the other thing that happens, it is revealed very briefly, almost blink and you'll miss it, that the government is 100% murdering the abandoned babies.
Yeah.
En masse in some room in the ministry somewhere.
Yeah.
And Kitty knows about it.
Yeah.
And Pansy Ponsonby is asking her about it, and Kitty's response is basically just, you don't want to know.
Just like,
no.
I mean, don't ask questions you don't want to know the answer to.
Pretty much, yeah.
Do a dance for me, Pansy. Show me your collection of large pillows.
When I was making the notes for this, I was like, God, I can't believe that Kitty knows about the murdered baby room and still works for the ministry. But also, like,
I don't know, they just went through like a big old brutal war.
One of the things that I think is so important about this book is the burden and pain of knowledge that you cannot do anything about. Kitty cannot do anything to make this situation any different. It's made pretty apparent, right, that her relative success with the propaganda isn't accomplishing much.
Yeah.
Her being a little cog in the machine is not really making a difference at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that she can do.
Yeah.
And so her response is to sort of emotionally detaches from the whole thing. Like, she doesn't care. She's just...
This feels so familiar. This feels so much like COVID.
Yeah.
I'm fine. I'm doing great.
It's good.
Let's keep talking.
So
I'm not spiraling.
So 6 months have gone by, and Chester is discovering that abiding by his principles is more upsetting than he anticipated.
Oh.
Because they embarked on their affair. The way that he justified embarking on their affair was that Kitty was like, well, I'm not planning on getting married ever.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, if we're not keeping each other from being married, we can just have sex, right? That's fine.
Yeah.
It's been 6 months. He is no longer satisfied with this.
Oh, he wants to get married.
He wants to be married.
Oh, sorry, Nicholas.
They refer to it a lot in this conversation as being friends, but that is definitely like a euphemism for having an affair.
It's the talking stage.
It's not enough. He wants
to lock it down.
He wants to lock it down.
Cuff it up.
And she spends a good chunk of time trying to convince him that they are better off as lovers. Yeah. And that she doesn't actually want to be anyone's wife.
Good for her.
Right?
That flapper independence.
She kind of tries to be like, you wouldn't like me as a wife.
For what?
You like me as a friend. You wouldn't like me as a wife.
Mm-hmm.
And he is not having it.
What a reversal of roles.
Uh-huh.
That's fun.
Yeah. She basically is like, well, I'm not letting you ruin your career. And he's like, well, I don't want to just be lovers. And she's like, well, bye.
Yeah. Sucks for us.
They break it off.
Aw.
It doesn't last, of course.
Oh, the breaking off doesn't last.
Of course not.
Yes, they mend it.
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
But she really doesn't want to be married. But
she can't stay away from that D.
Well, and I think it's important a little bit, too, that they are both throwing over their own principles for this.
Yeah?
They're both giving something up.
Wait, okay. Hold on. Let my brain catch up. I'm drinking decaf over here. Hold on a second. His principle that he is feel free to cut this part.
No, it's good.
Let me work through it.
Got to make sure everyone's on task.
His principle that he is giving up is that he can't have babies or get married.
Correct.
Because of his disabled siblings.
Yes.
And her principle that she's giving up is that she wants to remain independent.
Correct.
Got it. Thought through it.
But they just can't resist each other. There's
Right.
a brief period where she's like, I'm going to quit working at the ministry. I'm going to go.
Eat, pray, love.
Well, there's this protest group that's been quietly kind of building in the background.
Anti-brain.
Called the Stop It League, who are succeeding because they have spent the entire time being very vague as to what they want stopped.
Yeah.
And so every time the government tries to censor them, there's like no justification for it.
Yeah.
They're like, stop what? And the Stop It League is like,
It.
And so she briefly, to kind of underpin how much she doesn't really have any ideals on this front, she's like, well, maybe I'll just go be a journalist for the Stop It League for a while.
Yeah.
But then
Like, I don't give a fuck.
But then she and Chester tumble back into each other's arms. They can't help it. They get secretly married.
Explosive. They get secretly married.
They get secretly married.
That's so bad.
It is.
Oh no.
They go on a honeymoon in Italy. Secretly.
The sexiest place.
They run into Vernon Prideaux there.
What's Vernon doing there?
He's on vacation.
Oh. What are the chances?
He very politely pretends not to realize what's happening.
Yeah. I guess they're not wearing rings.
Well, I think they are in Italy, but that's the idea, is that you're not, you're in Italy. You're hoping you're not going to run into...
Not going to run into Vernon.
Yeah, but they did.
Does Vernon care? Does he believe in the propaganda? He does?
Vernon believes in Chester.
Oh, okay.
He's pretty clearly disappointed in Chester by the end of all of this, but he keeps their secret. He is not the person who sells them out. But seeing Vernon on their honeymoon underlines the fact that this is going to come out.
Yeah.
It's inevitable. There's
Yeah.
no way this is going to be kept a secret.
Yeah.
And before it all comes tumbling down, there's only one more really important thing that happens, which is on their honeymoon, we finally get a big burst of Chester's interiority.
Sorry. I was thinking about jizz. The honeymoon. Sorry. We're talking so much about having kids.
We
Okay.
finally get a big burst of Chester's
Chester,
forbidden
period.
baby juice.
No.
His uncertificated...
This is a family podcast.
Is it?
No. Not anymore, because we're decertified to have children.
Reading this book, I was like, man, we are so uncomfortably close
Oh, yeah.
to some of this shit.
So what do we get a burst of?
We finally understand Chester's interiority.
Okay.
Which to me is one of the really interesting cores of the book, because again, he is the Ministry of Brains,
Yeah.
right? All of its idealism, all of its cruelty come from him.
Yeah,
Like that
it's
is
his idea.
He is complex. And Kitty finally gets the chance to ask Chester, especially now that they are married, about his siblings.
Right.
Spending time together in Italy, they see someone who clearly has some kind of something going on. And Chester visibly recoils. The first thing she says is, how you hate them, Nikki. And he says, I do. And then he changes the subject. But then he loops back to it. And he starts talking about, so it is his twin sister and then another sibling, a brother, who are both, and I'm not going to use any of the terms that they use in this book because no one needs to hear that. But
Right.
they are both, I get the impression, they both need a lot of support.
Yeah.
They are not capable of living independently.
Yeah.
And so he starts talking about how, at first as a small child, he just took it for granted. And then he says, at first, when I began to do more than just accept it as part of things as they were, it only made me angry that such things should be possible, and frightfully sorry for Joan and Gerald, who had to go about like that, and so little use to themselves or anyone else, and so tiresome to me and Maggie. It seems like he goes through something resembling stages of grief. He starts out feeling very sorry for them, but then he gets, instead of progressing to acceptance, he lands on anger and just sort of gets wedged there. And he's profoundly angry at them,
Yeah.
at his parents, and profoundly angry at the broad concept of what he terms stupidity. But even in this, he has to kind of admit that he has another sister, Maggie, who is very clever, who is endlessly patient with their two siblings, who does not have this deep-seated rage. And it really seems like Chester's problem is the really profound disdain that you sometimes find in able-bodied, privileged young men, especially, for people who are not that. And it seems like a pretty cohesive portrait of that very particular kind of rage.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Well, and it's the kind that is so familiar and that turns it all into I mean, it takes the focus away from the people who are actually meeting obstacles with the way that like society and the world are set up. It takes the focus away from them and what they could need to live healthy, happy lives, and puts it onto able-bodied people and like how they're inconvenienced and, you know, this is about me and like, and it's, I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about this because I used to work with like autistic teenagers, and my own understanding of it changed as I learned a lot more throughout the years. And as I learned about emergence of like the neurodivergence movement, as opposed to like for a long time, the big organizing body was Autism Speaks, but that was run by parents of autistic kids.
That organization is sketchy as hell.
Yeah, and it was all about changing autistic people to fit into the world, and it was all about what the parents and the families suffer, and like, and then thankfully that conversation changed, and neurodiverse people speaking up for themselves, being like, "Fuck all that."
Yep,
it's not actually about you; it's about me, and maybe I don't need to change to fit the world. Maybe the world should change to fit me. Not to like get on a pedestal, but this is all so much that, and it really makes me very angry.
These are things that justifiably incite a lot of anger. But also what I find interesting about it is that this is, like I said, a pitch perfect, pretty nuanced portrait of a very particular kind of ableist disdain that is being pointed out as a very particular kind of ableist disdain in 1918.
Yeah.
Which is impressive.
It is impressive.
Because this is what radicalizes him.
Yeah.
And he goes on to go on kind of a rant about how humanity is constantly slipping up. Humanity is constantly falling short of improving itself as much as it really could.
Mm-hmm.
And it's simultaneously, especially when he moves on to humanity writ large, you kind of get it. You're like, yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but like you're wrong. Like it's just not how it works.
It's just fucking dark, you know? That his radicalization comes from his own family and his own siblings, and he has a sister who, I don't know. To me, it seems like a bit of a projection of his guilt that his sister's so good with it and everything, and you know, he like can't deal with it. But what do I know?
Well, and he lands in some interesting stuff. And one of the last things he says that I think is really interesting is, the mischief is that people in general don't want other people to become too clever. It wouldn't suit their turn. So the popular instinct for mucking along, for taking things as you find them and leaving them there, the popular taste for superficial twaddle in literature and politics and science and art and religion is pandered to on its own level. So you can see where he's kind of landing. You can find that same sentiment in any number of editorials published.
Oh, first The Atlantic
this morning.
Yeah.
But he apologizes to Kitty for rambling, and she says, "Go on, I like it. It makes me feel at home, as if I was sitting under you at a meeting. What I infer is that if your parents hadn't been first cousins and had deficiency in the family, there would have been no ministry of brains. I expect your father was right, and whatever is best." And then she says, "Of course, the interesting question is, what would happen if ever we were much cleverer than we are now? What would happen, that is, besides houses being better managed and disease better treated, and locomotion improved, and books better written, or not written at all and all that? What would happen to nations and societies and governments if people in general became much more intelligent? I can't imagine, but I think there'd be a jolly old row."
Kitty doesn't give a fuck.
Kitty does not give a single fuck. And the rest of the back and forth is him like trying to kind of rally and her just being like, okay, sweetie.
She's like, "You're so hot."
And I think her influence is so good for him. Because even though he calls her unnecessarily cynical, she is breaking down this sort of radicalized purist's idealism he has. And it says, "For a while they lay silent in the warm sweetness of the hilltop, and they looked at one another and speculated on the strange differences of human beings from each, and the mystery of personality, that tiny point onto which all age-long accumulated forces of heredity press, so that you would suppose that the world itself could not contain them. And yet they are contained in one small, ordinary soul, which does not break under the weight. So they looked at one another, speculating, until speculation faded into seeing, and instead of personalities, they became to one another persons." And the last thing that Kitty says is, "Isn't it fun," said Kitty, "that you are you and I am I? I think it must be the greatest fun that ever was since the world began. That's what I think. And everywhere, millions of people are thinking exactly the same. We're part of the common herd, Nikki. The very, very commonest herd of all herds. I think I like it rather. Being so common, I mean. It's amusing, don't you? And he finally says, yes, I think I do.
The beginning of her quote, I feel like I've heard that before.
Which? Isn't it fun that you are you and I am I?
Yeah.
That does sound like
Yeah.
the kind of thing that would get quoted ad nauseum out of context.
It feels like an Instagram graphic.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like that final sentiment.
She's wearing him down.
Mm-hmm.
She's convincing him to be a little bit more of a three-dimensional person.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time they get back from their honeymoon, things are going
Uh-oh.
rather sideways.
Uh-oh. Can't stay in Italy on a hilltop forever.
The ministry is fighting for its life.
Mr. Brain was gone too long.
Predictably, someone has figured out that they were married.
Already?
Already. I
We
mean,
just got back. I guess they both left at the same time.
yeah, well, it's a little unclear how much time after their honeymoon. It kind of sounds like maybe
Okay.
it's a matter of weeks, but like, again, they're not going to keep the secret for long. They
Yeah.
ran into somebody on the honeymoon, and even though he kept their secret,
Yeah.
it's not going to pan out for long.
Yeah.
Chester's being blackmailed by a journalist. The press writ large has decided that they are not actually in favor of all of these things. The public in general has hit their absolute limit on the baby laws. Lives are being ruined. Everyone is realizing how many lives are being ruined.
Yeah.
It's all going to shit.
Unforeseenedly. Surprisingly. Amazingly so.
Yeah.
Shocking, even.
Well, and the press are fed up with censorship too.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
And so inevitably comes the fall. There's a bank holiday, and sort of organically, a crowd of people descends on the ministry.
Yeah, we got the day off.
Where Chester is, because he's a workaholic, with Vernon. They're out front. Chester comes out on a balcony, and
Classic balcony.
the journalist that is blackmailing him is there. And is like, is it true that you're secretly married? And Chester has to admit it. It's the hypocrisy of it
Yeah.
that pushes them over the edge.
Yeah, that'll do it.
And they storm the building. They threaten to throw him off the balcony. They don't.
Shouldn't have stood on that balcony.
Here, let me find it. Because this is the last thing that happens, really. The government has overstepped itself. The Defense of the Realm Act is being overused to censor a bunch of newspapers. It comes down hard. The newspapers get mad. The crowd shows up, led by the president of the Stop It League. And what's really charming about the crowd, they drag him onto the balcony. They hang him over the edge of the balcony. And they start yelling about his hypocrisy. And there's a moment where it looks like they might kill him. But again, showing what Rose Macaulay thinks of people, thinks of humanity, I think, writ large. Then someone shouts, "We'll let him off this time, as he was just married. Let him go home to his wife and stop meddling with government." So they haul him off the balcony. They take him downstairs, and they're about to let him go. But he's watching all of this happen. And the crowd are starting to laugh, right?
Really?
Like, they're having a fun. They're setting, they're setting a building on fire. They're having a blast.
Yeah. Giddy.
To Chester, it was the laughter, good-humored, stupid, scornful, of the British public at ideas, and particularly at ideas which had failed. But in it, sharp and stinging, was another, more contemptuous laughter, leveled at a man who had failed to live up to his own ridiculous ideas. The laughter of the none too honest world, which yet respected honesty, at the hypocrisy and double dealings of others. They're quite right to laugh, thought Chester. It is funny. Damned funny. And he began to laugh himself. The problem is that someone sees him laughing and shouts, "You've ruined me and my missus. Took every penny we had just because we had twins. And you stand there and laugh?" And so that man beats the shit out of him.
Yeah.
He survives.
I mean,
and he kind of deserved it.
He definitely deserved it.
But I think that ending is so deft.
Yeah.
He watches his ideals crumble. He briefly finds the humor in them, but he still has to suffer for what he's done.
Yeah, and then he gets his comeuppance.
So he gets the shit kicked out of him.
Rightly so.
He goes to a hospital to recover. He resigns as the Minister of Brains. Kitty goes to see him. When he's healed up a bit, they go to visit his family. And that's the final humbling of Chester, is that he goes back to his parents, who are a vicar and his wife.
Oh, a lot of vicars.
A lot of vicars. And his parents are so happy and proud of him for getting married and tossing over all of that baby tax nonsense.
Like, we knew you'd grow out of that.
And it's the final humbling of Chester is going home to his parents and having them be like, We're so happy for you.
We knew you'd snap out of it.
Pretty much. And it's lovely, and it's quite charming. And the ministry collapses.
Rightly so.
Rightly so. And they meet Chester's sister, who seems lovely. And that's pretty much the end of the story. Kitty and Chester are on a train, and they are looking ahead, and so turned the world around. Individual desire given way to, as usual, ruining principles and ideas by its soft pressure. What would ever get done in such a world? Nothing ever. Suddenly, as if both had seen the same picture, they met one another's eyes across the carriage and laughed ruefully. That, anyhow, they could always do, though sitting among the debris of ruined careers, ruined principles, ruined ministries, ruined ideals. It was something. Perhaps, in a sad and precarious world, it was much. The end. So that's the story of What Not.
What's Not? Why did she name it that? Do you know? Did she go? Do you know why?
It is pulled from a quote that is in the epigraph, which is a woman, the defendant in a food hoarding case in January of 1918. Because...
Right. War rations.
Yeah. Things got really intense. People were starving.
Yeah.
I did not realize until I was doing some of the legwork for this episode that people were as badly off as they were.
Yeah.
And the quote is, "It has come to a fine thing if people cannot live in their homes without being interfered with by the police. You are upsetting the country altogether with your food orders and whatnot."
Yeah, that's a pretty... Okay. That's a good title. That's a good use of, like...
Yeah, that's the story of What Not, and we're going to get back together to discuss it, but for now, any closing thoughts, any burning questions?
I mean, it's pretty good. It's pretty impressive that she could draw that much humor during such a dark time, you know?
Yeah.
Basically write a story proving the need for satire and how effective it can be using the form of satire.
Yeah, we'll touch on this again briefly later, but she wrote what was possibly one of the first anti-war novels that came out during the war.
Yeah.
It came out in 1916.
It's impressive, honestly.
We might do that one on the podcast at some point too.
Yeah.
People were very angry about it.
Really?
And then she wrote this one immediately after the war.
And it's like really funny.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
It's a fun little read.
Real dark.
Real dark, but very funny. If I tried to squeeze in every joke that I enjoyed in this book, we would be here for 6 more hours.
Yeah.
But I would say if you get the chance, pick up a copy for the propaganda alone.
Yeah.
There are so many little posters and slogans scattered through the book, and they're all so good.
It's like in Idiocracy with, it's got electrolytes.
That plants crave.
That
All right. Well, we will be back together quite soon.
Yeah.
In the meanwhile, thank you for being here.
Thank you for sharing this book with me. It was very entertaining.
I'm excited to talk
It
about
gave
it.
me some thinky thoughts to think.
Gotta have the thinky thoughts.
Yeah. I didn't ask for them.
And
But
yet,
they're in my head now.
well, this is my own mind training course.
Oh,
Welcome.
damn it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, all of you out there, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, if you can, this week, this month, this pay period, consider supporting a living author because they could really use the help.
Yeah.
All right. Love you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Didn't Read It was created, written, and edited by me, Grace Todd. Kaylee Hughes is our publicist and producer. You can follow the podcast on Twitter or Instagram at Didn't Read It Pod, or reach us via email at didn'treaditpod@gmail.com. For source notes and further reading, as well as a list of all existing episodes, please visit our website at didn'treaditpod.com. We are recorded in Richmond, Virginia, with special thanks to Black Iris Social Club and Pesca Trio Publishing. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a review or rating on your preferred podcasting platform, or just tell a friend. If you did not enjoy today's episode, we are currently accepting applications for a full-time nemesis. Our intro music is Books, written, performed, and recorded by William Albritton. Freedom to a tyrant,